One of the personalities I remember from my early days at La Selva was Rafael Chavarria. Where was his role in this early La Selva?
Well, he was Holdridge's foreman. So when we took over La Selva, he became our foreman and was in charge of all the work crews, et cetera, for many, many years. So it was basically we inherited him.
Don Rafael always said that he was sold with the finca.
Yes, exactly. Well, he was.
Like the livestock.
Basically, that was the case. we got his papers. And, now, of course, La Selva, as it is now, with all this, with the buildings and construction and so forth, is a totally different place than when we started out, and even as it was as late as the 80s. But certainly the funding that we receive from National Science Foundation to build the place up is certainly, we always have to give them credit.
And were you doing research at La Selva in those early days?
Well, I was working throughout Costa Rica.
Okay.
I had a large grant to study leaf litter herbs here in the mid-70s. We had 2 years of monthly sampling, that sort of things. And then, of course, probably every graduate student that I ever had, we tried to get them into a course to come down here. Mm-hmm. Most of them worked at La Selva, doing various kinds of research. Now, we should talk about the building. The center in the San Jose.
Oh yes, so I remember a variety of offices. We were kind of vagabondish in the early
Well, when
days.
we started out, we had a little office in the microbiology building.
Yeah.
There was no biology building. So biology taught their courses all over campus. And it wasn't later till the Escuela de Biología had their own building. And however, by the time that we got rolling as OTS, the plan was once the biology building was built, then OTS would have a building next door. Deabadi drew a rough plan of a 3-story building with research space and teaching space and so forth. Well, that never worked out because during the surge of interest in the environment in Costa Rica, which in some ways OTS certainly helped inspire, the students demanded that space be kept as a reserve.
Oh.
So it's still there, with native
reserve.
vegetation,
yes.
But then there went our chance to build on the campus. Then during Don's tenure, there was an opportunity from one of the BID or the Central American Bank or some other funding agency to build a facility somewhere. The thought was on the main campus. And I recall Don and I contributed our own money to have an architectural plan drawn up for that, and then Don tried to get the funding, but that never worked either. So as you recall, of course, that we went from the little office in microbiology to the famous Casa Verde across the soccer field from the Escuela Roosevelt, and then we moved to that facility years later out in
near
the Lincoln School.
Yeah.
After Hurricane Andrew hit Miami, there was a lot of activity of rebuilding, etc. And the Fairchild Tropical Garden, as one of their things, got funding from a private foundation to build a tropical forest exhibit. And I read about this in the newspaper, and it said, oh, gave the name of the foundation and of the director. And he said, well, we gave the money, he says, but I have never seen a tropical rainforest. So I called Gary. Gary was in charge at that time, and I said, Gary, get on the phone and invite this guy to come to La Selva, for crying out loud. So I don't know whether Gary talked to him directly, but Jonathan got involved, and that's where we got the money for the Simon Center at the research campus of the university. But that was also a coup, because the rector at that time was a very well connected with Pedro Leon, who was our chairman of the board. And so one of the last things the rector did was authorize that site to be used for the building. So that was a triumph, but it took us 40 years
Yes.
to actually get our own facility located near the University of Costa Rica.
We heard a bit about the acquisition of La Selva. What about the other two stations at Las Cruces and Palo Verde? How did we come to
Well, of course, I believe it was Bob Wilson who had owned the Fantasy Gardens in Miami,
right.
decided that he wanted to establish a botanic garden in Costa Rica. So he moved down to San Vito, bought that property. There were several other people that were friends of his or associates that also moved there. They weren't going to build a botanic garden, but they bought property adjacent. So he established the botanic garden. But after a while, it became a huge financial burden for him. And so he was looking around for some way to maintain it, and, you know, his legacy, that it would still go on after he was gone. And Mildred Mathias, who was president at that time and had taken the courses down there frequently, they began to talk about, could OTS take it over and work out some kind of arrangement. And so as a result of that, that's how we acquired the Las Cruces property. The conditions were that Bob and his wife would maintain their residence there, and there were other conditions that helped support them as long as they were alive. So that's how we got into Las Cruces. That was very fortunate in some ways, because we got support from the Stanley Smith Foundation, specifically for the garden and facilities associated with it. Palo Verde, there was a North American family that owned a large hacienda there at Guanacaste, and Palo Verde was part of their holdings. And Jorge Campo-Badal was involved in this negotiation, and so they originally we just had the field station. It was still their property. So at one point, for whatever reason, they said, well, you know, we've got this outlying property with a little housing there, etc. This would be a good place for you to do stuff in Guanacaste, which is, of course, totally different than La Selva or Las Cruces. And then later on, after we were using it quite a bit, the government confiscated, I think, that hacienda and several others to create the national park. And however, they allowed us to maintain the inholding, which is our Palo Verde station right now. It used to be lots of fun to go there because you could fly in a small plane and land right by the facility. And of course, that was a magnificent place because of the difference in the wet season and the dry season, when that swamp fills with water in the wet season. So that, again, that was serendipitous that there was a possibility, and Jorge took advantage of it.